Hi, this is Robert Carroll.
Oh, hi, Representative Carroll. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Assemblyman.
Hi, how is everyone?
We're hanging in there. How are you doing?
I'm good, all things considered.
So just so you know, on the call we have Julio Peña, Sarah Hertz, Eleanor Nussbaum, Ellen, David Goldberg, Nomi, and Boris, and yourself.
Great. I hope you're all well. Is this a good time for me to call in?
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect.
All right,
so first we wanted to thank you for your time. We had asked you to come to our meeting today, but for many various reasons that didn't happen, so we appreciate your time now. We had some questions about a lot of state-level things, especially the budget that the governor is trying to pass. So one of the first things we wanted to ask was, we've heard that Governor Cuomo will only sign the budget if it includes a rollback to bail reform, but a lot of us are opposed to that because we want fewer people in jail at this time, not more. We wanted to know your position on this.
Sure. So I don't support rolling back bail in any way. I posted that this morning. There was an op-ed in the Times about that. And I've been very clear that I don't think we should roll back bail for a whole host of reasons, but especially now, not just with the fact that COVID-19 is so contagious and will affect people in various walks of life, but especially people who are in prison, and that any big policy question should really be put off till after this crisis is averted. And hopefully this crisis is averted in the next few months. And, we are able to slowly reopen government and school and everything else, and people are able to go about their daily lives. But we definitely should not be passing substantive pieces of legislation unless they deal directly with trying to fight this absolute disaster and crisis that is going on. I think we were right in passing bail the way we did last year. I do not think we should change it, and if we want to have a debate about it, I think that debate should happen down the road when we've gotten past this crisis, and that is where I stand. I think that's where lots of my colleagues in both the Senate and the Assembly stand. That being said, I do think there are a number of state senators who are trying to push this most of all, and I urge people in groups like yourself to urge Andrea Stewart-Cousins, Mike Gianaris, and the entire state Senate to push back, because I do think it is coming from their House, not the state Assembly.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't know about everyone else on this call. I actually had called Senator Felder's office to say, we know you support rollbacks, but will you at least consider not having it at this time? And they didn't have an answer.
Fair enough. I can't speak for Senator Felder or the Senate, but this is coming from the New York State. This is coming from the New York State Senate, so I would urge. I would also call leadership in the state Senate, and the two leaders. Obviously, Andrea is the majority leader, and Mike Gianaris is her deputy. I would make it very clear to them that they cannot, hide purely behind that they've got some senators in, possibly swing seat districts that that they get to then dictate to the rest of the legislature what we do.
All right, reasonable enough. We also wanted to ask, we know that the governor is looking to pass Medicaid cuts, which seems like it wouldn't be like a great idea during a pandemic either. Where do you stand on that, passing the Medicaid?
Look, I think the governor's Medicaid redesign plan team, I was never a big fan of it, and always thought, that it was a committee in search of a problem. We do have very high Medicaid costs. The state is going to essentially go broke because of COVID-19. But what we need to do is find ways to raise revenue and find ways to expand medical services at this time. We are not going to cut our way out of this problem, nor are we going to solve this problem by reducing money to hospitals, which are severely strained at this point. So I don't support it. There are going to be, we are going to need to raise revenue. But there are obviously, we need massive help from the federal government, and we need to probably, this is going to be a huge, huge issue, but we need a massive stimulus from the federal government. We've got a whole host of problems that are going to come down upon us very, very shortly.
Well, what are the options for raising revenue in the current budget? Is there any possibility of doing that?
I think, to be perfectly blunt, I think it is outside of things that are regressive or flash in the pan, like sports betting, marijuana, casino licenses, fees. I would love to see us, the state assembly has proposed in every budget, and the governor and the state senate have not agreed, increasing the income tax on millionaires is a simple way to raise real revenue. Increasing taxes on second homes is a simple way to increase revenue. I think they need to be on the table. I don't know. I think we will pass a budget within the next week. I don't know if they will in fact materialize.
Do you suppose that there's any actions a group like ours could take to help facilitate this? Obviously,
well, I think again, it is reminding the Assembly and Senate that, look, we're going to be faced with some very serious questions in the next coming months around what we can and cannot afford, and what's going on with countless people who are going to possibly feel the effects of this virus either physically or economically or both. And we're going to have to make big decisions. And so I think it's really important that the state continue to protect the most vulnerable, continue to make sure that people who need medical treatment are getting it, that make sure people who need economic assistance from, figuring out a way to pay their rent or pay their bills, figuring out employment options. I mean, this is going to be, even in the best case scenarios, if this lasts only the next 6 to 8 weeks, and that is the worst part of it, and we're able to start going back to normal, there will be big economic consequences. Obviously, if it starts lasting, months and months and months, the consequences will be much, much more dire.
All right, Julio, I believe you had a question as well.
Oh yes, somewhat related to kind of the current health crisis. I know that a couple of political campaigns committed to stop petitioning ahead of the emergency executive order that was passed, which I wholeheartedly supported. But then I was also a little disheartened when the State Board of Elections, kind of last minute tweeted the information for the petitioning drop off. So it's not so much a question, but just kind of more of a statement of, I think in this kind of midst of a public health crisis, I think it's important that while we're protecting, families and our community, I think it's also important that we're making sure that we're protecting our democracy, because I think we're trying to protect communities in this process. But I think when we're, sending out information that is kind of crucial to protecting the vote and making sure that that's a clear and transparent process.
Julio, what are you specifically referencing? I'm not following.
So what I was referencing is the tweet in response to the law that, or I'm not sure if it was a legislative law that was passed or an executive order.
Well, there were two. So look, the executive order was to stop petitioning.
Correct.
The governor stopped all petitioning and the collection of signatures. He had the authority to do that.
Correct.
Under the law that we gave him earlier this month. He did not have the authority to change the filing deadline, which the state legislature did have and did do, and because of some squabbling between the legislature and the governor, we ended up not passing that. Instead of passing that bill Monday night of last week, we passed it Wednesday night of last week, which was unfortunate and I thought really unbelievably frustrating. What did the State Board of Elections, did they tweet out something about the executive order or the law that was passed by the legislature?
So I think they tweeted out that information Thursday night at 10 p.m. that petitioning filing was due that Friday at close of business, which I think doesn't really leave enough information and enough time for folks who are trying to either get on the ballot or trying to get information. Less than 24 hours I think is not enough information.
You're totally right. You're totally right. It was terrible.
Yeah. So I just feel like, even in the midst of a public health crisis, which I think is important, and we're trying to protect our communities, that it just doesn't bode well for protecting our democracy, and particularly in communities that are historically underserved.
That's why I've been saying for weeks now that we should pass a law that unilaterally provides everyone with a absentee ballot that will be mailed to them for all of the upcoming primaries and general election. I hope that by the June 23rd primary, that people are allowed to congregate in large groups, and that life has gotten mostly back to normal. Obviously, there will be consequences that reverberate past that date no matter what. But hopefully that is the case. But in an abundance of caution, if that is not the case, I don't think we should, put people in a place where they don't know how to vote and end up suppressing the vote of lots and lots of people. And so I think we need to pass that law this week or next week and move the presidential primary either all, if we can do it all by mail, or to move it to a later date and also make it all by mail, so that we preserve our democratic norms.
Yeah. Hey, Bobby, it's Jess Byrne. Just to follow up on that, because that was one of the questions I had, was just how are we going to vote? Will that affect our state constitution? I know, like, we have to go through a constitutional convention and stuff.
No. First, I think it's actually you could write a law that allows for no-fault absentee voting without changing the Constitution. We've decided that we're going to change the Constitution, but I think you could artfully draft something that would give everyone the right to an absentee ballot and a vote-by-mail ballot without changing the Constitution. But that's what we're doing. But you could very easily, I tweeted this about 2 or 3 hours ago, you just put as one of the criteria a public health crisis, and then you unilaterally you put some other enacting legislation that, in a public health crisis, the governor or the Board of Elections can provide every registered voter or every registered Democrat, Republican, if it's a primary, with an absentee ballot within, 30 days or 15 days of the election date. So I mean, look, all of these things are within our power. We can figure out a way to do them. That would be one way. I'm sure there are other people who've got other ideas, but the Constitution I don't believe is in the way.
So are there any other updates that coming out of Albany that we should know about that maybe haven't gotten a lot of traction because of the pandemic?
Look, I think people should generally say there shouldn't be policy in this budget. There really shouldn't be policy in any state budget, but every year we do that. There are debates around surrogacy. There are debates around marijuana. There are debates around domestic terrorism, which I think is a terrible bill that would, basically just end up incarcerating, people who have committed a violent crime, but basically for the rest of their life because of more than 2 people are shot in an incident. They're considered domestic terrorists, which, I'm not justifying somebody shooting more than 2 people in one instance, but that happens regularly. I think we should not be putting people 20-year-olds in prison for 75 years.
That's fair.
So, there's tons of stuff like this. I think people like yourselves should tell the leaders of the Assembly and Senate, pass a budget that deals with the issues of coronavirus, deal with issues that are likely to be immediate after effects, so our elections, housing, unemployment. We should not be fighting over criminal justice reform, surrogacy, marijuana, gambling, things that the state has gotten on for 240 years without them. I think we can get on for another 6 months, and we can then go, and those are real issues. I'm not trying to downplay them. Mm-hmm. They're important issues, and I care about them. I would like to see surrogacy passed. I would like to see marijuana passed. But we should do them in the light of day, and we should do them with a normal debate, not under, a crisis mode.
So one thing that surprised some of us is Assemblymember Ortiz suggested we should immediately pass the New York Health Act during this crisis. I work in the administrative side of healthcare, and I see that even during this time, my administrative time as well as a lot of clinicians' time is taken up doing this. I mean, there's insurance companies that employ nurses and doctors to decide who gets what care. Are you with him on that?
Look, I support the New York Health Act. I support us going towards a single-payer system. I think that the coronavirus epidemic has just made it all the more apparent that we need to have a universal healthcare system that, that not only covers everybody, but, makes non-financial decisions like having more beds, more respirators than are financially viable, so that when we do have public health crises, we're able to better respond. The administration of the New York Health Act is enormous, and it's an enormous budgetary need. I think that, even if we were to pass it, it would not change what is going on the ground over the next 6 to 9 months. The bill, it takes years to implement. And so I don't think the the best time to pass it is today. Just like I don't think the best time to pass changes in our criminal justice laws or the like are today. Now, if we change the laws I'm talking about changing, if we change any, are about immediate things that happen immediately: elections, unemployment insurance, letting people who are independent contractors or sole proprietorships, usually have issues with filing for unemployment benefits, seeing if we can get them unemployment benefits, seeing if we can talk about, can we freeze commercial rent and residential rent, or find a way to help people meet their rent needs. These are the things that I think we have to focus on. I think COVID-19 just shows that that our medical system is broken in many ways, and I think proves the point that we need to have a single-payer system that provides for all. But we need to, I think, do that. That is such a large undertaking. I don't believe, should pass the New York Health Act tomorrow, and I think actually it would undermine it ever getting administered, because it would give the governor a reason to veto it, which would be to say, we're in an emergency. I'm not, upending the way our healthcare system works right now, and the issue would be ostensibly dead. So I disagree with the political tactic as well.
All right. Did anyone from the group have any more questions?
Yeah, I just was wondering if you know anything about the MTA. It's going to need a bailout, obviously. And Norma,
yes. Look, I think that the MTA will need a $4+ billion bailout minimum. I think, congestion pricing is unlikely to raise as much revenue as we originally thought. I think the work patterns of people over the next year or two may very well be different. I have been pushing a bill to put a fee on non-essential online deliveries.
Oh, I was going to ask about that, actually, in light of recent events.
I think that is an important thing that we should be seriously considering. I think that the federal government needs to also help in assistance. The MTA has lost maybe 75% of its ridership. I hope it loses 90% of its ridership, because we all really should be staying home as much as possible and socially distancing. And I hope all of you are doing that. And I hope all of you, if you do go to the park, please don't go to playgrounds, basketball courts, handball courts. We've had a huge problem in my district and other people's districts of the parks just being inundated with people. And this is one of the reasons why the Italian quarantine wasn't originally working as well as it should have. I think it's working better now, was that too many people were finding loopholes or ways to interact with one another. And we really at this time need to be in our apartments, unfortunately, for the next 6 or 8 weeks. And hopefully if we do that, we will get past the worst of it and we'll be able to go back and enjoy our cities and our friends and family members.
Hey, Bobby. So one of the things that's happening, and this is DOE related, and so maybe outside of your realm, but I think the order for parks to close came down after schools closed on Friday, and so all the school playgrounds are still open right now, and people are still using them. So I don't know who I can talk to. I mean, I can call.
I was just on the phone with the governor's office. I am putting out a press release right now with Brad Lander asking the governor and the mayor to be more forceful in their closure. People need to not go. I get it. People have young children. It is difficult. But you can't bring your kids to the playground, and you should tell that to your friends. I unfortunately think we're going to have to take more drastic steps, and we're going to end up having to ask the police to go and tell people to move or ticket them. But it's really, really bad. Just like we all shamed people who were going to bars and restaurants the last few days, and people said, look, you've got to stop this. It's not appropriate for – I live a couple of blocks from Prospect Park. You would have thought everybody was, having a holiday and a giant party. And it doesn't mean that you can't go out for a walk. It doesn't mean that you can't go out for a jog or a bike ride. But unfortunately, those things have got to be done solo or, yes, I guess if you're living with the person in your house or apartment, fine. But it's not a time to play stickball. It's not a time to play catch. It's not a time to meet friends. It's not a time to have kids play on jungle gyms. And it's really, really, it's not helping, because I think the only way that we get to a place where we're able to go back, where your kids are able to go back to school, maybe in the middle of May or beginning of May, or, people are able to go back to work at the end of April, beginning of May, is if we all actually stay home for the next 5 or 6 weeks. If we all just keep cheating, I don't think we're gonna do much better, because we will have to interact when we have to go to the grocery store once a week, or have to run an errand, or have to do something where you go, look, it's impossible to hermetically seal myself in my apartment, but people really, really, should try not to congregate in any way, shape, or form.
In all honesty, a problem I'm facing is like I said, I work in healthcare administration, not at the hospital level, but we have several people who have been infected where I work, and we can't really close because we're medical, and because the hospital also needs the revenue to make up for a lot of their shortfall. But we're pretty much all considering we're probably infected already. It's a challenge. And we'll never know, because we can't get the test until we're symptomatic.
That's very difficult.
Isn't some also education? Because I was in the park, we didn't talk to anybody, we just walked. People were on the playground with their kids with masks and gloves. So it was this weird juxtaposition that the playground and swings were full with masks and gloves, kids and adults.
Right.
Yeah, it's stupid. I mean, it's just people shouldn't be in playgrounds. I can't be blunt enough. It's just not and we're doing something this afternoon about it. We're trying to get the mayor to be much more heavy-handed.
So speaking of getting the mayor to be heavy-handed, and this is not education related at all, but the other thing that I've heard is that because places like Planned Parenthood, and this has to do with reproductive health care, they've cut back their volunteers, and so they don't have escorts, patient escorts, and the protesters are still out there and getting dangerously close to patients trying to enter a facility, and the police aren't doing anything about it. Scarily close.
Okay, so I will raise this the next time I talk with the mayor's people, which I talk to regularly. You guys should raise it. People. The one thing, I think we are coming to a place where people are going to be told that they can't leave their house, to just be perfectly blunt, unless they're doing something specific. That is what happened with Italy. New York State has 15,000 cases. We have 5% of the cases worldwide. We have 20 million people, and the vast majority of them are concentrated in the 5 boroughs or the close counties. It is a true crisis in New York. So I don't want to scare people, but I do think some very, very heavy-handed policies are about to happen over the next week.
So one policy that would be helpful to those of us who do work in healthcare is we spend a lot of our time screening patients for symptoms before we let them into the building to seek for their regular or urgent non-COVID medical treatment. And if people do have symptoms, we refer them to virtual urgent care, provided that they're not in an emergent situation. But New York Medicaid does not cover virtual urgent care. What can we do to change that?
I mean, the way we can do to change that is, look, that is Medicaid is the topic of the day in Albany. And I think that's a great point. I would love for you to email me that so that I can pass that up the food chain to some folks in the Assembly, because that's nuts, that Medicaid doesn't cover that in New York. And if we can figure out a way to do that, it seems like we would be helping a lot of folks.
Yes, and what's amazing is some of the managed Medicaid plans, like Health First, do cover it, but not straight Medicaid. It's a whole thing.
Got it.
I'm wondering if on the state level there's any influence you have over what's happening in either the jails and prisons or ICE facilities with detained immigrants.
Well, ICE facilities, I think less. It's a federal facility, I believe. The prisons are state-run. Rikers is city-run. I support the mayor's executive order to release people from Rikers who either are charged or convicted of minor crimes, and just to release them, or to release also other individuals who have certain chronic illnesses. And again, that their crime is either minor or the charges against them are minor. I think that was a smart call. I am for vastly reduced prison sentences across the board for all crimes. There are certain terrible, violent crimes and people who've committed multiple crimes and recidivists who, yes, there needs to be penalties for. But the vast majority, even those violent crimes, most people are in jail unbelievably too long. And it does not serve any justifiable reason except to kind of torture individuals. And so this is just another glaring example, like the glaring example of our inequities in healthcare. This is brought up. It's just another glaring example that keeping people in prisons unjustifiably long times, you're just imperiling their life and well-being. And so, I am for us looking at also our state prisons and saying, this is a good time for clemency for lots of older folks, lots of folks who've probably served, who are younger, who've served considerable amounts of time for things that, though bad, they don't deserve to die for or to be tortured for any longer.
I think that's all for now.
Okay.
Thank you for coming to our meeting on such short notice.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And for being able to answer all of our questions, even some of the tougher ones or some of the ones you put up on social media already. Much appreciated.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. Always feel free to reach out.
And I'm going to email you. What's the best way to get in touch with you about the New York Medicaid telehealth issue?
Just send it to my Assembly account, Carroll, or carroll@nyassembly.com, carroll@nyassembly.gov. We check that every day. Thank you so much for that.
Are yours just so we know, like, are your staff in the office, or is email just the best way to get in touch with you these days?
My staff are virtually commuting, so people are checking. We're checking messages multiple times a day and following up. We all have remote computers. I'm on my Assembly email right now. We're trying to do as much social and physical distancing as possible. We want to set a good example. And, we're going to try to see how that works, for the next few weeks. Obviously, we want to try to make sure that people, when they need government services, that they're getting them. Mm-hmm. So it's a juggling act, but we're trying to do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we really appreciate this. Thank you.
Thank you all. And we'll talk soon. And everyone, please stay safe, wash your hands, and remind people not to go to the playground.
Ever again.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.